So, Buck, it's good for the two of us to get together. As always, I enjoy having opportunities to catch up and to speak with you. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. Thank you. Thank you for asking. And yourself?
I'm doing well. You know, there's so much that's going on as we see with financial services and risk, compliance, cybersecurity, and it's the thought on cybersecurity was something that I thought would be good for us to talk about today. You know, with regards to cybersecurity, banks getting hacked, and all the things that are taking place, as we focus in with credit unions and the community bank sector, I thought that we'll have a conversation today to kind of see what are some of the things that they need to do, right, in order to be equipped and to be prepared for this reality. And so, from your perspective, from the things that you continue to work on, but what do you think that the credit unions and the small community banks, what do they need to do to focus their organization on the increase of cyber attacks that we see that's occurring right now in the ecosystem?
No, I mean, yeah, this is a great question, Wayne. And my answer genuinely needs to be much longer, but I'll try to keep it short. And if necessary, we can follow up with more conversation.
Right, absolutely.
You know, because what happens when, you know, when you look at compliance and attacks and all that, the Bank of America and the Citibanks of the world, they have got a 2,000 people team sitting there, and they've got half a dozen vendors all around the world. So even though it is tough, they've got the resources to do something about it. The first challenge for credit unions, because I work with a lot of them for last 10, 12, 15 years now, their challenge is twofold. One is they just don't have the ability to hire deep technical skills, and they don't have the job description to hold on to them even if they recruit someone. I mean, what can a deep technology guy see as a career path in a small credit union? Like almost nothing, right? So their first challenge is that. And the second challenge is, of course, money, which all of us understand. How can they invest so much in hardware, software, people, new and new tools that keep coming up every day in the market? But if you ask me, even though the laws are by and large the same, the regulations are by and large the same, and seemingly the big banks have got more compliance on their plate than smaller banks or credit unions, in my experience, compliance is much harder for the smaller banks and the credit unions as compared to the big ones, because of the reasons that we saw just now. And there are no layers. See, important thing about credit unions, you take any law, right? The law will simply say that the CEO and the CFO are responsible for signing off. But if you look at the Bank of America, even when CFO signs off on something, he has got probably 24 layers of people under him who are doing all the preparatory work, checking and double checking and monitoring and managing. And he gets a lot of input from all those people before he puts the pen to the paper. In a small credit union, 1 branch, 2 branch, 5 branch, the board of directors is required to say that, hey, I've got a good security program in place. It is in accordance with NCUA para 1748. And they are going to sign this on the basis of what? There are no layers below them to feed them anything.
So in view of this, that's a real situation, right? A real situation that you have presented. So in view of this, what do you think that the credit unions or the community banks, what do they need to do so they can mitigate the risk that exists?
First of all, what is happening, I have myself done training from many board of directors of credit unions and small banks. And what I try to do is tell them upfront that I'm not going to use any words like a firewall or a DMZ or Active Directory. I'm not going to do that, because so many people are throwing so much jargon at them, and there is no way they are going to understand what it is and what are they supposed to do about it. I mean, if you go to the director of a credit union and ask him or her, how have you configured your firewall? What do you expect them to say? right? But on the other hand, they are very mature people who have understanding of their business, understanding of their environment. So what I focus on is telling them about what is it that they can do to instill a culture of compliance in the small 10, 20 people team that they lead. And there are some excellent resources around that, again from the US government. In fact, I'll say very briefly because obviously that's
no, I think you should. I think you should share some of those the results of some of the things that you have seen and some of the research that you have accumulated.
Okay, sure, thank you, because I'm very, very committed to this. See, US government, you know, which writes all these regulations and security laws and privacy laws and all those things. Most of the work happens using a foundation of, I would call it, I call it a body of knowledge, which is again created and run by the US government under the Department of Commerce. It is called the NIST. I'm sure you are familiar with that. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. So what have they created? It's a 100-year-old organization. Their IT laboratory is now more than 50 or 60 years old. And I'm quite certain that they have created the largest body of knowledge about IT and IT security anywhere in the world. What is happening is, for some reason, they don't promote it. They're a government body. They say, hey, it's all free, available to all of you, no license fees, nothing, you're free to use. But because there is no promotion, unlike ISO or some other standards that are out there internationally, these people don't charge any money, they don't do any promotion, advertising, no certifications, nothing. It is not somehow getting picked up by our people. But I personally feel if our credit union boards start getting a glimpse of what the regulations are, like for example, 90% of the credit union compliance challenges can be managed by their board of directors without getting too technical. It's just if they understand very well what is NCUA's para 748. There is a paragraph 748 called security program in the NCUA body of regulations, which actually expects a credit union board of directors to maintain a security program. Now, what is that program? What is it based on? What kind of principles that are available from the body of knowledge of NIST that can help them to take some appropriate posture, train their employees? There is a lot that can be done, Wayne.
So that's a very good point that you've mentioned. So there are standards that exist, and these standards need to be ingested by the credit union board so that they know exactly what to do. But so what I'm hearing from you, Buck, is that there's a disconnect, or potentially a disconnect, where these standards may not necessarily be understood by the credit unions that really need to understand what they need to do, because there's a risk, right? So how do you envision kind of helping credit unions to understand the liability, the risk that's involved, and what they need to do to mitigate that risk?
Yeah, two things. One thing I already briefly touched upon, and that is that it's not a very well publicized kind of thing, so a lot of people don't know about it. And the second thing is, it is huge. The body of knowledge, like I say, it's probably the largest in the world. And I study it every day, and I can say that I barely know maybe 20% of it. Okay, right. It's huge. But that also makes a challenge. That right. How can a board of director member or a chairman of a bank sit down and start studying NIST? It's impossible, right? It's even for a professional who spends all 10 hours a day on learning that, it's not going to be possible in one lifetime. It is that big. So there is a job for people like us to present a curated version of that body of knowledge to credit unions in small, kind of, to begin with some simple principles, to begin with overview of what is a control, what are the groups of controls, and what is section 748, and how to relate the NIST risk controls to section 748 to build a decent security program for a credit union without spending a ton of money, without hiring people, without hiring expensive consultants. It can be done 100%.
Very true. Can you provide for our audience a little bit more detail around this? Because I think what we're sharing is really important. It's very valuable, but can we bring this down in very practical terms on what can actually, what do you suggest that could be done?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it depends how much time we can spend today, or we can have a separate session. I would like to start first by walking our audience through section 748 of NCUA regulation. What exactly is it asking you to do?
From a high level, I think that's worth from a high level to share. Just and then again, I agree. In future conversations, we can talk, a little more detail. But I think you've identified a very valuable point that our credit unions that are listening, certainly, and community banks certainly need to understand, if they don't already, but how they can apply this and understand the risk that they're facing.
I mean, section 748 security program, and there are a couple of other smaller impact sections, such as how do you protect your members' data and those kind of. But 748 is the perfect starting place for everyone, and it essentially lays down in very clear terms what is it that the NCUA, the regulator, expects to see when they walk into a credit union for an audit. We want to see that you have got the security program where people's roles are defined. There is a list of hardware and software and third-party applications that you use. We want to see how access rights are granted, monitored, controlled, deleted. We want to see what is your contingency plan, how do you disaster recovery. So very specific points, Wayne. It's not too hard. It's not too hard.
Okay, good. No, this is very good. So understanding this, say for example, a credit union, they understand that there are things based on this proposal analogy that needs to take place. They need to understand this. So what do you do? What can we do? What can you do to kind of help these credit unions to
first
navigate
thing is,
this?
of course, there is a huge, and I do it all the time because we have to spread this, and I do it as partly my business active, but partly as my commitment also, that, conducting webinars, going in person to the board of directors for half-a-day training, teaching them the whole 748, helping them identify what. I mean, one thing, Wayne, the board of directors that you talk to, they may not be very technology savvy, IT savvy, but they are very smart people.
Absolutely.
Once you present to them what is the crux of the matter, they jump onto it very quickly and are able to apply it to their particular situation.
Okay.
But if you bombard them with technology, then obviously nothing is getting achieved,
That's
except
true.
maybe you walking away with a feeling of, false smugness that, hey, you know more than them. That's stupid, right?
Right. So we can probably think of in a future conversation to really kind of walk through what of how this regulation, how they're impacted, and talk in very specific ways on what you do to help the directors of the credit unions to navigate through this, so that there's a clear understanding and that they're going to, again, understand what their risk is and how they can mitigate this risk by fully understanding what this is all about.
And then I tell them that, hey, for example, one control is that sometime an employee leaves the organization, or you have to fire an employee for something, you must terminate that employee's email access, etc.
Right.
In, let us say 2 business days, right? That's the requirement for the law, for example. One board member is sure to get up and say that, hey, Bug, why 2 days? That's too long. It must be done in 2 hours.
Right.
So they understand it very well. The importance of doing that, they understand very well. It is just a matter of putting it as a formal, table of activities in front of them, that, hey, these are the 12 things that you must do every day. And they do it. They do it very well. Wherever I got customers doing this, they do it absolutely well, religiously. And then there is I have myself created a small, kind of SaaS application on a cloud, which I teach them to use, and they can keep monitoring against that. Like I can tell them that, hey, you set up in this tool your own requirements. It will keep shooting you emails that, hey, you have to fill up this form, you have to fill up that form, you have not done this, you have not done that. So it becomes a kind of reminder of compliance for them all the time. And I can walk you through that sometime. Let us do that, because I think it will be very useful to your especially credit union and small bank audience. Because small bank, let me close on this, Wayne, quickly. For credit union, it is section 748. But honestly, all this section 748 and this and that is just different nomenclature by different regulators. It's all the same thing.
Right. But I think this call or this discussion was very helpful because I think we identified a very shiny object, right? We identified the fact that credit unions have a risk, and if they really don't understand the regulations of which you had mentioned, that it can certainly expose them. And I think as we continue to provide education into this ecosystem, it's going to be very helpful in very specific and tangible ways of what the directors are responsible for. That's going to help the credit union itself as well as the members.
And they understand it well. It is just somebody needs to assist them, get it, onboarded.
That's very good. So why don't we do this? Why don't we schedule another conversation about this? And at this particular conversation, we'll take some feedback. And when we post this video on this podcast, we'll take some feedback from our audience.
Sure.
And to kind of ask them, what specific things they would look for with regards to knowing, about the regulation, and then what they need to do. And I think what we'll do is we'll incorporate some of that feedback in our next discussion. How's that?
Happy to do that. Absolutely.
Good. We look forward to the next time that we can actually talk again.
Thank you so much for having me, Wayne. Have a great day.
You too.